Portents. Wyrmstar. For 18 days and nights the Wyrmstar hung above Tallow Reach. It bathed the mountain-top citadel in its wan light, lending its people a sickly pallor, and making metal and wood look rusted and rotten. At first, the writhing celestial orb had been branded an ill omen, for it resembled a vast mass of squirming worms, formed from pale green light. Though it was foul in aspect, it was at least distant and intangible, something not to be looked upon directly. Then the sickness started. The omen became a curse. A terrible wasting fever shot like wildfire through the settlers and soldiers that dwelt in Tallow Reach. Though their mountain-top fastness had long protected them, all the high walls in the realms could not ward away the illness that soon became known as wormblight, for it stemmed from the Wyrmstar's glow. The apothecaries could do little. The prayers of the priests had no effect. Worse followed. Those who died of the sickness did not stay dead. Within minutes of its demise, the corpse rose as a revenant and set about the living with biting jaws and choking fingers. The elders of Tallow Reach froze in horrified indecision, and by the time they took measures, it was too late. Day by day, Tallow Reach consumed itself in a frenzy of sickness, undeath, and terror. The mountaintop isolation that had so long protected its people instead trapped them within a prison of its own making. Yet, even as the city collapsed into anarchy, the dead came to outnumber the living, and there was those with cynicism enough to see opportunity and turn a profit from it. Accounts of the Darkening Hour by Augustus Fambadillion. Archanaut Admiral Kerngrim stood on the deck of his ironclad, the Gilded Oath, and watched the sallow-faced humans file aboard. They came up the gangplanks in single file, having been relieved of their weapons, and anything else of value, by his Archanaut crewmen. The skydock, upon which the people thronged in their dozens, jutted out from the eastern edge of the city over the 10,000-foot drop to the valley below. Beyond, the city burned. The Arcanauts were holding people at gunpoint. Sky wardens hung in the air above and around the airship, keeping watch with the harpoon launchers, in case anyone showed signs of undeath. Kerngrim ignored the hate-filled stares and hurled insults of those who couldn't pay. He was holding to the code, after all. To his mind, the only senseless tragedy was an unexploited one. In Tallow Reach, sanctuary had become the single commodity, and the crew of the Gilded Oath were the only ones still selling. "Soldiers, mercenaries, where's the civilians?" said Endin Master Boric. "Chewing on the living, most likely," said Kerngrim. "If folk have survived in Tallow Reach this long, they'll have done so Bastille." "Durkin's heard talk amongst this lot about the last barricades are about to fall. Maybe already have," said Boric. "I venture we've enough aboard to turn a fine profit, Admiral. We've already overloaded." "We go when I say we go, Boric," said Kerngrim. "Have I steered you wrong yet?" "That you've not, Admiral, but the sooner we're away from this cursed star, the better," said Boric. "Can't argue that," replied Kerngrim. "We'll sift this last pan of gold, then cast off." He glanced around. Under the guns of the Grundstock guards, human refugees were filing into the airship's holds, or finding themselves spaces to huddle amongst the packed masses on the main deck. They avoided one another's eyes, and pointedly looked away from those left behind. Kerngrim shook his head in incomprehension. He would never understand the strange sentimentality of humans. Back on the docks, things were turning ugly as desperation began to fuel recklessness. One man rushed the Arcanauts, brandishing a sword and buckler. Guns roared, and he was flung back into the crowd. Those nearest him screamed and yelled. It wouldn't be long before they tried to rush the gangplanks, thought Kerngrim. And who could blame them? He wouldn't wish this place upon his worst enemies. The Admiral began to order the gangplanks raised, and his crew back aboard. He was interrupted by a cry from above. Looking up, Kerngrim saw that gigantic bats had swooped out of the half-light, soaring on silent wings to launch themselves at his sky wardens. Harpoon launchers hissed. Arcanauts clubbed their way through the refugees with gunbutts and fists as they hastened to take shots at the monsters. Kerngrim heard more shooting and felt a sinking feeling. Back on the docks he saw bodies and blood, gunsmoke drifting. With the Arcanauts distracted, the crowd had surged, and the nearest refugees were now locked in a vicious melee with the armoured Duradin on the docks. "Deadwalkers!" shouted Lookout Hangheist from the forward dome. "Deadwalkers coming down Dock Street by the 100, Admiral!" Kerngrim spat a choice oath. The stink of death reached him, and the moans of countless revenants came soon after. He could see them now, a mass of staring eyes and yawning jaws, sallow flesh and clawing hands, advancing down the street like a tide. The Wyrmstar's light bathed the scene, making the buildings lining the streets seem to rot visibly before Kerngrim's eyes. "Cast off!" he yelled. "All hands to stations, pull in the planks, cut the damned cables, and cast off!" "Admiral!" Vorik's voice came from behind, full of alarm. Kerngrim span and saw men and women boiling up from the cold hatches, wild-eyed and scrambling over one another in their terror. You're just against me," growled Kerngrim as he saw deadwalkers clambering out of the hold behind them. "How in the name of Gurney's arse did those things get on my ship?" "Balls, Admiral," gasped a bloody Arcanaut as he fought his way through the mayhem. "Like prisms. They concentrated the Wyrmstar's light, saturated the cargo, started to turn." Kerngrim swore again. His crew fought for their lives as deadwalkers came upon them, and refugees punched and surged and fought anything that came near. Humans screamed as they pitched over the railings. Guns boomed again and again. Still, the cursed star shone down, and the ship appeared to rust and rot beneath its light. Kerngrim saw his one chance. Setting his jaw, he made for the helm, swinging his double-handed hammer. A zombie came at him, clad in Free Guild colours. He smashed it aside. A moment later, a screaming mercenary barreled into him, and Kerngrim drove the man back with a savage blow to the midriff. Reaching the helm, Kerngrim pulped the zombies that were feasting on steersman Cadric, and then shoved the Duradin's corpse out of the way. No time for niceties now. One gangplank had been dislodged, but the other was pinned under fallen bodies. The dead were spilling up it, some toppling off the sides, others clawing their way onto the overladen airship. He cursed, and then threw the engines to full forward. Etheric motors roared below decks, and the Gilded Oath started to move. She lumbered away from the docks, but Kerngrim could already tell the craft was too heavily weighed down. The engines laboured, and the prow came around sluggishly. Too late, he realised that the ship wasn't going to build sufficient momentum to snap her mooring cables. Instead, the length of metal cables slammed taut and wrenched the Gilded Oath sideways. Kerngrim was flung from his feet and began to slide. The sky docks shuddered and cracked, zombies and refugees alike hurled from them, to fall and fall. Kerngrim hit the railing with a loud clang and sailed over the top. For a horrible moment, he was plummeting before his reaching metal gauntlet snatched a hold of an edge. Adrenaline surged. Muscle and sinew screamed with effort. Kerngrim hauled himself up, away from the hungry gulf below, onto a flat, hard surface. Safety. No, he realised. Not safety. The docks. He reached for his hammer, but it was gone. He looked to his ship. There was no sanctuary there. The decks were a blizzard of flesh and gore, the hull churning with spectral rot. The dead had taken the listing craft, and it would hang there until its aether gold ran dry, and it fell from the skies. The Gilded Oath had made her last voyage. And so, thought Kerngrim, had he. Moaning zombies closed in on all sides, glowing sickly green beneath the Wyrmstar's baleful glare. The Admiral took a deep breath, clenched his metal gauntlets, and rolled his neck with an audible crunch. "Aye, right, you shambling wretches," he said as they came for him. "Who's fast?"